The streets were empty, except for the occasional sound of a fighter jet flying overhead. Rose and her husband Patrick packed their bags and checked the outside for any sign of danger. They went upstairs to get their daughter Anna, who ran out of the house as soon as she saw them. The neighbors also came out of their houses, some of them running towards the community gate. Rose, Patrick, and Anna joined the crowd, hoping to reach the safe zone. The safe zone was set up at a nearby stadium, where the military was supposed to protect the survivors. The area where they lived was already infected by the virus and was declared a quarantine zone. The military would bomb the place from time to time to eliminate the zombies. Rose and her family made it to the gate, where a military truck was waiting. The soldiers checked the documents and the skin of the people who wanted to get on the truck. Rose let Anna go first, then followed her with Patrick. The soldier who checked their documents asked them a few questions. He noticed Patrick's pale face and pushed him aside. He pointed his gun at him and ordered him to take off his clothes. Rose and Patrick tried to explain, but it was useless. Patrick had no choice but to reveal his bloody wound, which he got from a zombie bite. The soldier refused to let them on the truck and said they had to stay in the quarantine zone. At that moment, another fighter jet flew over them, dropping bombs on the buildings. The soldiers drove away, leaving the people behind. Rose and Patrick ran to a nearby house, where they hid in the living room. They hugged each other, hoping for a miracle. Patrick knew he was dying and told Rose to leave him and go to the stadium to find Anna. Rose refused and said she believed he would survive. She said they had to stay together as a family. She waited for the jet to leave, then went out to look for some antibiotics for Patrick. Rose went to the kitchen alone and searched for anything useful. She heard a noise and grabbed a kitchen knife. She cautiously walked towards the room where the noise came from. She opened the door and saw an old lady sitting on the bed, unable to move. Rose sighed in relief. She heard another noise behind her and called her husband's name. She ran to the living room and saw a pool of blood on the floor. She covered her mouth in horror. She heard a scream. She quickly ran into a small room and listened to the sound outside with fear and despair. She ignored her tears, which were worthless in this situation. Rose gathered her courage and ran out of the house. Her husband, who had turned into a zombie, followed her closely. Rose tried to climb over the wire fence, but her husband caught up with her. Rose kicked his hand away, but he was about to bite her. A man in a military uniform, Spears, shot at Patrick several times. Patrick did not fall down but stumbled towards Spears. Spears shot him a few more times and finally killed him. Rose had only one thought in her mind: to find her daughter Anna. She walked to Spears and hugged him. She begged him to help her find her daughter. She said she would do anything for him in return. A similar scene of life and death was happening elsewhere. A man and his girlfriend were walking to the stadium. They got lost and argued with each other. The woman stood in the middle of the road and complained. Suddenly, a car sped by and hit the woman. She fell to the ground. The woman was seriously injured and coughed up blood. She had internal bleeding from her organs. Her boyfriend saw that she was beyond saving and left her. A man with hearing loss, Ryan, walked slowly from a distance. He noticed the woman lying in the middle of the road. Ryan ran to her. He did not know that the apocalypse had begun. He saw the woman bleeding profusely and did not know what to do. Then, a woman came from the side. She is a short-haired Korean woman. She dragged Ryan away and took him with her. They hid and moved forward. What they did not know was that the woman who was hit by the car died soon. When she died, she became a zombie. The female zombie ran very fast and chased a man. Fortunately, the man managed to escape. The female zombie continued to look for prey and saw a man. The man raised his shotgun and shot at the zombie. The bullets hit the girl zombie's body, but he didn't stop her from approaching. The man quickly hid in the room. The female zombie had to look for another target. She ran into a small yard and looked at the pedestrians on the street next to her through the fence. The female zombie was very smart. She knew she couldn't get past the fence. She turned around and pushed open the small door next to her. She ran out of the garage and turned to the street next to her. She attacked one of the pedestrians with lightning speed. The pedestrian's companion, Lance, escaped by luck. In another corner of the street, an officer was escorting a prisoner. The prisoner was actually the soldier who saved Rose, Spears. He was still wearing a Spears t-shirt, and his face was covered with dried blood. He resisted being escorted. The officer in charge immediately chose a room to use and settled Spears. He then left with another officer to look for a vehicle, leaving one officer to guard the prisoner. Spears tried to explain to the officer that he was not the person they were looking for. The officer ignored him and turned his back to check the situation outside. Spears saw that this was ineffective and changed his strategy. He admitted that he knew the information they wanted and even knew the location of the money. There were millions of cash hidden somewhere. The officer was very tempted and turned his head to look forward to Spears telling him the address. Spears saw that he was hooked and continued to lure him. He asked to go to the bathroom first and said that he would take the officer to the hiding place after that. The officer verbally denied it, but his desire had already made him waver. He agreed to Spears' request, but he could only go to the corner of the living room and could not leave his sight. Spears knew how to negotiate. He first went to the corner to prepare to pee. He moved his handcuffed hands from behind to the front. He made a new request. He said he could only go to the bathroom. The officer reluctantly pressed him with a gun to the bathroom. The small bathroom was a good place to fight back. Spears hit the officer's head with his elbow when he got close to him. He followed up with a series of moves. Spears slammed the officer's head on the sink. When the officer was completely dizzy, Spears picked up the gun and shot him in the head. He then stripped off the officer's clothes and ran out. He reminded himself not to be careless and not to easily believe what others said. Otherwise, he would only end up miserably. The scene switched to another place. A blonde woman was driving a car slowly. Her attention was focused on the map in front of her. Then the car window was knocked. A man stood outside the car. The blonde woman's name was Barbara. She was also looking for the stadium. She lowered the car window a little and saw the man outside. The man told Barbara that he was also going to the stadium with his family. Barbara was very hesitant. Everyone was on their own now. People were everywhere. She politely refused the man's request. The man begged her. He had children to appeal to Barbara's compassion. He had to admit that this trick was very effective. Barbara was moved. After the man repeatedly promised that he was a good person, Barbara opened the door. She sat in the passenger seat. As soon as the man got on the driver's seat, his face changed immediately. He shouted at Barbara to get off the car. Everything was the man's disguise. After Barbara got out of the car, a man suddenly appeared and beat up the man. Barbara saw the situation and got into the car again. In the car, a man and two women looked at each other nervously. The accidentally formed group of three did not trust each other. The driver was a black-bearded man named William Velez. In the front passenger seat was the Korean woman, Sun, and in the back was Barbara. The black-bearded man took the initiative to speak. He talked about his situation, trying to prove himself. Seeing that the two women did not respond, the black-bearded man picked up a bottle of water and drank it. He then passed the water to the Korean woman and Barbara. The tense atmosphere was eased a bit. The Korean woman only spoke Korean. The black-bearded man turned his head and talked to Barbara. Barbara, who had just experienced being cheated, was afraid that the black-bearded man would leave her behind. She rolled up her sleeves and showed her arms full of watches and bracelets. She wanted to prove her value. The black-bearded man turned his head and looked at Barbara's arm. A smile appeared on his face. He just said that humans should be kind. He changed his mind in a second. Seeing the man's strange smile, the Korean woman and Barbara felt uneasy. They had no choice now. The man quickly changed the topic. He first asked Barbara if she had a gun. Then he asked the Korean woman to look for a gun in the trunk. They both found nothing. The man had to continue driving. Barbara looked at the map anxiously. She couldn't understand it at all. The Korean woman grabbed the map and gestured to the black-bearded man to show him the way. The Korean woman noticed a small truck driving on the street next to them. She observed it for a while and then told the black-bearded man and Barbara. The truck had been following them. The three of them guessed that the truck wanted their car's gasoline. To get rid of the truck, they had to change the road. Because there were too many obstacles on the road they were driving on now, if they changed the road, they would deviate from the correct route. The Korean woman communicated with the black-bearded man. The two people who couldn't speak the same language couldn't communicate at all. The black-bearded man said that he was familiar with the neighborhood. He looked at the map and drove by himself. The black-bearded man turned onto a small road. He used to work here and was very confident about the road conditions. Just then, a lot of people rushed out of the surrounding houses. They smashed the black-bearded man's car with something. The three people in the car were panic-stricken. The windows on the side were all smashed. They hurriedly sped up. A burning cart suddenly popped up in front of the car. The black-bearded man couldn't dodge it and hit it. Fortunately, the car's head pushed the cart away. The black-bearded man didn't suffer much damage. The rear of the car was hit by a Molotov cocktail and caught fire. Barbara and the Korean woman screamed. The black-bearded man sped up. The three of them escaped the small road safely and returned to the main road. The black-bearded man continued driving. He felt like there was something dragging behind the car. He couldn't see anything in the rearview mirror. He had to choose a place that was relatively empty and stopped the car. The black-bearded man asked the Korean woman to get off the car and check. The Korean woman didn't trust the black-bearded man. She blamed him for almost causing the death of everyone in the car because of his arrogance. After the black-bearded man repeatedly assured that he wouldn't leave her behind, the Korean woman got off the car. She bent down and looked around. It turned out that the rear wheel was stuck with a children's bicycle. The Korean woman lay down and tried to pull the bicycle out. A zombie in the distance saw their traces and ran towards the car. The black-bearded man and Barbara saw the zombie's figure and shouted at the Korean woman to get on the car. The Korean woman didn't let go of her hand. She kept straining and pulled the bike. She saw that the zombie was about to pounce on her. She ran nimbly and jumped in. The man immediately drove away. The black-bearded man tried to speed up and slow down, trying to get away from the zombie. It didn't have much effect. The three of them thought they had successfully chased the zombie away. They saw the zombie suddenly appear on the windshield of the car and completely panicked. The black-bearded man continued to use acceleration and deceleration to try to shake off the zombie. The zombie took advantage of the momentum and smashed the car window. He reached out and grabbed the black-bearded man's neck. The black-bearded man resisted desperately. He shouted at the Korean woman to find a hammer from his backpack and hit the zombie's head. Because the zombie was too far away, the Korean woman had to stick out half of her body from the window with the hammer. She hit the zombie's body with the hammer. The zombie turned his head in pain and prepared to attack the Korean woman. The Korean woman hit the zombie's brain with a backhand. The black-bearded man broke free and the zombie fell to the ground. The black-bearded man saw this and quickly stepped on the gas, crushing the zombie under the car. The car continued to drive forward, and the Korean woman looked more and more wrong. She picked up the map and looked at it carefully and found that they were driving the wrong route. The black-bearded man stopped the car. As they were discussing, the small truck that had been following them before disappeared and reappeared behind them. It pressed against their car and stopped. Barbara was the first to notice the truck's trace. She told the two people who were discussing. The three of them became alert immediately. They watched the truck's movement nervously. The truck just stopped quietly behind them. This stalemate was not a solution. The black-bearded man restarted the car and drove slowly. The truck also kept the same speed and followed them closely. This did not eliminate the three people's vigilance. To shake off the truck, the black-bearded man suddenly sped up and made several sharp turns. He then hid behind a building. The three of them breathed a sigh of relief, but suddenly a man and a woman ran out. They begged the three of them for help. They didn't want to cause trouble. They left the alley with the car. They just saw death and didn't save them. They didn't have the ability to help others either. The Korean woman only nodded. The black-bearded man saw the necklace and asked if there was a photo inside. The Korean woman smiled and said there was a photo of her mother. The black-bearded man also talked about his own situation. Maybe it was because they had just experienced a life and death test. Their trust in each other increased. The three people on the car got to know each other again and told each other their names. The black-bearded man was called William and the Korean woman was called Sun. William smiled and said he was glad to meet Sun and Barbara. It was the first time that everyone had a benefit. Their original mutual alertness turned into trust. William and Barbara even teased Sun to sing. She shyly sang an English song. Barbara sang along. William drank beer and listened to their singing. Their happiness was soon interrupted. The truck that they had shaken off before followed them again, and it also hit their car with its own. A road chase battle ensued. William was completely annoyed by the truck and decided to fight back. He braked hard and let the car fall behind. Then he accelerated sharply and hit the truck's tail. He cursed and drove the car next to the truck. The two cars squeezed each other on the narrow road. They didn't see the damaged truck blocking the road ahead. The truck and William's car hit the truck together. After a dizzy spell, Sun woke up first. She shook William, who had also passed out. They pushed open the car door and ran. Barbara, who was in the back seat, also fell down. The car accident turned their colleagues into zombies. The surviving group ran to a place in the wild, and they entered the place at the last moment. Rose's four people continued to walk forward. They came to a school outside. They first observed through the iron fence. They found that there was nothing suspicious inside. They slipped in from the gate. Soon they entered the first floor of the school building. Spears held up his gun and walked slowly. Rose pulled Ryan behind her. Lance fell behind. Spears decided to check the first floor first. He took Lance to the teacher's office in front of the camera. Rose took Ryan to search for useful supplies. Spears walked into the office cautiously. He searched for a while. He didn't miss any corner. There were no zombies inside. There was no trace of survivors. It was Spears who went into the medical room alone. Lance waited outside. Maybe it was because he hadn't calculated the days for a long time. Lance was fascinated by the calendar on the desk. After a while, Spears came out with a bunch of medical supplies. He told Lance who was standing still, and he threw all the medical supplies to Lance. They turned their heads and walked to the corridor. Rose and Ryan also collected them. They found some clothes and blankets. They regrouped. The place was empty. There were signs of robbery. They probably evacuated earlier. Rose and Spears discussed for a while. They thought that the school was relatively safe. They could go upstairs and stay for a while. They continued to go upstairs. They came to a music classroom. The music scores were placed messily. Spears checked all the rooms first. He made sure that there was no trace of anyone else. Then, he picked up a wire. He wrapped the sliding door from the inside. No one could easily push it open from the outside. Ryan was very interested in the drum set. Lance came over. He let Ryan let go of the drum. Then he tapped the drum lightly with his fingers. Ryan could feel the vibration of the drum. Lance's movement was not well controlled. He made a small mistake. That made Spears angry. He dared to hit the drum and make a sound. Spears was furious. He dragged Lance to the wall. Rose rushed over to stop them. She persuaded Spears not to act impulsively. Spears finally warned Lance harshly. After this little stunt, they chose to rest on their own. Lance walked to the corner alone. Rose let Ryan sleep in the restroom. Spears shifted in a chair. He stares at the door. Rose also let Spears sleep, but Spears said that he wanted to stay awake. Rose also moved a chair and sat next to him. Maybe it was because of the rare tranquility, or maybe it was because they were in a school. Rose thought of her lost daughter, Anna. Her eyes were full of tears. She chattered and described the scene of the day she parted with her daughter. It passed quickly. The noise upstairs woke up Spears and Rose. Spears opened a crack in the door and listened to the movement. Rose woke up Lance and Ryan. Waiting was definitely not a good idea. They walked out of the classroom and followed the source of the sound upstairs. They turned a corner and there was a child standing in front of them. The noise just now was probably made by him. He saw the four people's figures and turned his head and ran. They calmed their nervousness. Ryan made many gestures towards Spears and Rose. The two of them didn't understand. Then, Ryan ran towards the child's direction. The other three also followed. They ran out of breath, but the child was gone. Spears decided not to chase anymore and proposed the idea of leaving. The other three did not agree. They couldn't leave a child alone. Spears thought this might be someone else's bait. They couldn't take risks blindly. They couldn't survive. Rose suggested that she and Ryan search the kids' trail room by room. Spears and Lance went down the stairs first. Then Rose and Ryan went downstairs and searched for them. They arrived at the locker room on the basketball court. The strange smell inside made Rose and Ryan can't stand it. They quickly went through the locker room and reached the inner bathroom. Ryan walked in front. The smell in the bathroom was even stronger. Ryan didn't know what he was seeing. He backed away with his mouth open. Rose quickly calmed his emotions. Rose followed Ryan's horrified gaze and saw that there were several corpses lying inside the room. A foul odor emanated from the corpses. Rose couldn't stop herself from vomiting on the spot. When she came to her senses and looked for Ryan, he was gone. Rose shouted Ryan's name and ran outside. She ran into the corridor. She didn't see Ryan but heard other voices. Rose followed the voices and got closer. It sounded like someone asking for help. Although she wanted to save people, Rose still remained wary. She picked up her utility knife and continued walking towards the sound. The cries for help became clearer and clearer. Rose arrived at a restroom. The child's cry for help came from the toilet cubicle. Rose comforted him with her voice and opened the toilet door. There was no child inside, only a loudspeaker. The cry for help was piped through the loudspeaker. Rose realized that she had been fooled. She cursed angrily and went back the way she came. The toilet door was locked. The child's mocking voice came over the loudspeaker. Spears and the group did not go downstairs. They returned to the music classroom they had occupied last night. Spears found that the supply of medicines on the table was gone. Someone must have taken them. Spears decided to leave immediately, but when they got to the building's entrance hall, they found that the door was locked. Spears takes Lance back to the office they visited yesterday. After searching for a while, Spears found a map of the school building. They left with the map. They didn't notice the huge help sign on the glass beside it. They immediately headed to the underground storage room. Spears found the key to open the door. When they opened the main closet door, it was empty. There was no trace of the key. They had to go back underground and find another way out. The accident happened. Lance stepped into the room door and tripped over a wire. After a loud bang, Lance was locked inside the room and couldn't move. Spears tried to open the door, but it didn't move. Spears kept moving forward with his gun. He was more careful with his footsteps. Spears came to a door. It was blocked by a wooden door. He removed the wooden plank and opened the door. A woman rushed in. That woman was Rose. Spears accidentally came to the toilet where Rose was trapped. He saved her. In another corridor, Ryan, who escaped, was running around. Then he saw the child they saw in front of him. A skinny boy. Ryan signaled to him with sign language. The boy did not respond. He looked behind him. A large group of boys were walking towards Ryan. The leader of the boys pointed a gun at Ryan. The other boys tied Ryan up. Ryan was gagged. He followed the boys to their base. There were many other children here. They lived together in the school. Ryan was thrown into a corner. He was also tied up with another man. He was also covered by clothes. Spears and Rose searched for traces of Ryan. They searched the classrooms. Then a gunshot stopped their search. Rose and Spears followed the gunshots. A large group of children stood in the middle of the corridor. Spears held his gun and faced them. The kids pushed Ryan, whom they captured. They promised that as long as Spears gave up his gun, they would release Ryan. Spears was not willing to compromise. Rose rushed in front of him. She held the muzzle of his gun. After persuading her, Spears finally gave in and gave the gun to Rose. Rose held up the gun to show sincerity. The boy quietly loaded his own gun. He gave it to the boy next to him. He told him to shoot as soon as Ryan made his move. Two other children lifted Ryan's hood and cut the tape that tied his hands. Ryan saw Rose and Spears in front of him and immediately walked happily towards them. Rose hurriedly shouted to let Ryan stop. He had to know that he couldn't hear. The boy with the gun decisively fired. Ryan fell to the ground. The children scattered. Rose cried and hugged Ryan. Fortunately, Spears was calm enough. He followed Rose and turned and ran. Ryan quickly became stiff and turned into a zombie. He chased after Spears and Rose. They ran all the way. Spears fired several shots at Ryan but did not kill him. The group of children also appeared in front of the iron gate. They made a fuss. Ryan chased the two relentlessly. Spears was knocked down by him. Fortunately, he cleverly handed the pistol to Rose. Rose shot Ryan several times. Spears escaped Ryan's control. He got up and ran with Rose. The exit door was locked. Ryan was gradually approaching. Then, a man opened the door. Spears and Rose hurriedly ran out. They used a table to block the door and escaped successfully. Scene switch. William, son, and the three people on the truck hid in the restaurant at the intersection. Outside, the roar of the zombies seemed to disappear. They carefully opened the back door and walked out. William followed with water and food. They planned to go east, but the zombies were hiding around the corner of the restaurant. As soon as Son and William took a few steps, they rushed over. Son and William had to return to the restaurant. They went back to the front desk of the restaurant from the back kitchen. Outside, the truck was still there. Inside the school, Lance, who passed out from the explosion, woke up slowly. He called Spears' name through the locked iron gate. No one answered, so he had to turn around and go to another road. Lance entered the school library. The lights were bright, but there was no one. Lance calmly walked to the sofa and sat down. He even picked up a book on the table and read it. He turned to the page where the bookmark was. He looked at the text on it. Then his emotions became very agitated. He threw the book to the ground and trembled all over. After a while, he looked forward in horror. Then he kept backing away and running. It seemed that something was chasing him. Lance ran wildly in the corridor. He climbed to the roof of the school building along the iron ladder of the patio. Several bombers flew back and forth. Lance dodged and looked around the roof. He wanted to find a way to go directly down from the roof. There was a metal pipe on the roof that went straight to the ground. Lance went down the pipe to the second floor. He gritted his teeth and jumped directly from the second floor to the ground. Fortunately, he was lucky. Rose and Spears barely escaped. Lance came out easily without any danger. Lance stood outside the school building and looked back at the school building. At that time, the group of children in the school appeared on the roof. They cruelly pushed a man down from the roof. The man died on the spot. The man soon became a zombie. He pounced on Lance. Lance came to his senses. He quickly turned around and ran out of the school. The zombie followed closely. The zombie chased Lance to the main road. Lance saw that the situation was not good. He struggled to turn around and hid behind a fence inside a house on the side of the road. He thought he could breathe a sigh of relief. He didn't expect the zombie to break through the fence and chase after him. Lance hurriedly ran away again. Lance ran through the fence and into the house. The zombie also ran in and chased him relentlessly. Lance ran and pushed the things next to him. He hindered the zombie's progress. Finally, Lance successfully passed through the house. He took a step ahead and locked the zombie in the house. Lance, who came out of the house, ran out several streets away. He stopped until he was out of breath. The escape just now injured Lance's right hand and right foot. He tried to find a house nearby to enter. The doors were all locked. Lance had to change his target to the vehicles on the roadside. He tried to open a car, but all the doors were locked. He continued to walk to the next car. Fortunately, this car was not locked. Lance successfully entered the driver's seat. After searching for a while, he found the key on the top board of the car. Because Lance's hand was seriously injured, he couldn't use his strength. Lance had to twist his left hand and start the car. But even then, Lance could only hug the steering wheel and get out of the car as the engine did not start. He walked helplessly along the roadside. Then his eyes were attracted. There was a dog across the road, a living dog. Lance was overjoyed and called the dog to come to him. The dog didn't pay attention but ran forward. Lance was sad. The dog didn't want to be with him. So Lance continued to walk alone with his sadness. Lance turned a corner and found a supermarket. He hesitantly approached the supermarket door. The door opened automatically. He thanked the supermarket's sensors. Lance entered the supermarket. Stunning products were neatly displayed on every shelf, and there was no one or zombies inside. Lance felt relieved. He pushed the shopping cart and walked around the supermarket. He picked up a lot of food. He put the food on the counter. He went back to the shelves to find a knife. He wanted to open a can of meat. After Lance got the tool to open the can, he heard the sound of the supermarket door opening. Lance quickly hid at the end of the shelf. Then he carefully peeked at the person who came. It was a zombie. It was the zombie that had been chasing Lance. Lance circled around the shelf to avoid the zombie. The zombie soon found Lance's trace. He ran towards him. Lance ran out through the safety passage. The zombie still followed him closely. The two chased each other again. Lance is very agile despite his chubby body. He dodged the zombie around the bus. He also took the opportunity to climb on top of the yellow bus. The zombie didn't know how to climb up. He tried around the bus. The zombie couldn't climb up. Lance relaxed. He lay down on the roof. He looked up at the sky and began to close his eyes. A while passed. When he came back to his senses, the zombie's howl seemed to be gone. Lance carefully checked both sides of his feet. He didn't see the zombie's trace. He slowly crawled to the back of the bus. Well, the zombie didn't leave but stayed at the rear of the car. Lance hesitated for a while and decided to get off the bus and run away from the front. Then he moved lightly and slowly got off the bus from the front. The noise of his landing was accidentally too loud and made a sound. The zombie behind him rushed over. Lance hurriedly climbed back on the roof. This time, the zombie learned Lance's movements and also climbed on the roof. Seeing that the zombie was about to knock Lance down, Lance quickly jumped onto the RV next to the bus. The heavy Lance smashed the roof of the RV and fell in. He fell and hurt all over. Lance trembled and stood up. He opened the door of the RV and prepared to go out. Who knew? The zombie was outside. In a moment of panic, Lance burst out with a strong desire to survive. He jumped out of the broken window at the back of the car. He avoided the door. The zombie rushed onto the car. He chased Lance and also jumped out of the window. He continued to chase Lance relentlessly. Lance started to flee again. He turned out of the parking lot from the broken wire fence. He ran into a fire station. To prevent the zombie from breaking in, Lance took the cabinets next to him and blocked the door. The zombie didn't seem to come. Lance walked into the warehouse. The warehouse was full of fire equipment and fire trucks. Although the door was blocked by Lance, the shutter of the main door was not pulled down. It left a gap that a person could crawl through. Lance wanted to pull it up. The zombie's figure appeared outside the door. The zombie who lost his target was wandering outside the door. Lance quickly made up his mind. He ran to the back of the fire truck. The zombie's in front of him. He pounded the shutter door hard. Lance moved to the passenger seat along the car body. Through the window, he saw the zombie that had come in. He looked around for Lance's trace. Seeing the zombie that had come in, Lance had no strength to have another chase. He ran to the office area on the side with his hands and feet. He bent over and walked over. He tried several office doors and they couldn't be opened. The last door was not locked. He quickly opened it. Lance squeezed into the room in a flash. The way out of the room was locked. At this time, the zombie's roar in the warehouse made Lance's heart tremble. Lance looked around and found a big axe on the wall. He took the axe. Then he had to fight for his life if he couldn't get rid of it. Lance ran back to the warehouse and hid in the dark. He prepared to attack the zombie from behind. But when Lance shouted and was about to do it, the axe head was caught in the iron net behind him. The zombie was attracted by Lance's loud voice and turned his head. He saw Lance coming. Lance had to run away. He turned out through the gap of the shutter door. The zombie grabbed his foot. He kicked his leg and got rid of the zombie. The two chased each other again. Lance ran to the street. There was a figure next to a car. Lance hurriedly called for help. The person didn't react. Lance had to change his way and ran into a bookstore. He rolled and crawled into the bookstore. He hid under a table. Quickly, at the door, a man appeared and finished off the zombie. Lance was careful. Lance walked with a bow. "Thank you" was the last sentence the man heard before he died from being hit. The atmosphere in the restaurant was very heavy. The two groups of people who gathered for the car accident had no communication. The baseball cap man Manny opened the blinds by the window. The woman Carmen sitting opposite him joked. The baseball cap man boasted that he was not afraid of zombies. When the two were talking, the zombie suddenly leaned on the window. It scared Manny half to death. He jumped up from his seat. Carmen on the other side was also scared. He hurriedly closed the blinds. William in the restaurant was annoyed by Manny's stupid move and cursed. Manny, who had just been sworn at to his face, did not take it well. He picked up a table knife and yelled at William. William couldn't stand Manny's arrogance. He got up and wanted to teach him a lesson. Fortunately, Son and Carmen stopped him. They sat down again. They were very angry with William's recklessness. They shouldn't make enemies at this time. William apologized for his emotional outburst. Then the door of the back kitchen was pushed open. Manny, Carmen, and another survivor from the same car, Phil, walked in with a smile and a pile of cans. They thought they were lucky to find this place. Not only was there enough food, but there were also a lot of people. They knew there were 5 people in the restaurant. There were only 2 zombies outside. When Phil said that, William immediately retorted, "The 5 people who came in were not with him." Phil tried to calm William down, but William didn't forget. It was because of their truck that his car crashed and caused this mess. Phil explained that it was all Marvin, the driver, who did it. He said they should blame Marvin, but now that things have happened, it's pointless to blame each other. The important thing is to get out. William didn't buy his nonsense, but Phil didn't give up. He invited William to talk alone. They went to the back room. Then he persuaded William to cooperate with him. He said they were the most valuable people in this group. William agreed. But Phil dropped a bombshell. He said the government had already taken over. He said they had to do something necessary. Then Phil suggested that they should kill the others and take their food. William asked him if he was crazy. William was shaken, but he didn't give up on Son. Phil knew it was no use to talk more. He asked William to go to the city center with him to get weapons. He said they could find a way out there. On the other side, Son sat alone in the front hall of the restaurant. Carmen sat down and talked to Son. They said they had smuggled over. They couldn't get on the rescue truck without government documents. They fell into this trap. The same experience brought the 2 women closer. They were no longer so resistant and wary. They continued to chat. Carmen told Son about the zombie nests she had seen. Manny also came over. He told Son that the zombie nest was getting closer. He said they had to leave as soon as possible. He said if they wanted to reach the stadium, they had to go through the zombie-infested area. He said this required weapons. Manny invited Son to join them. The 5 people with different intentions got along peacefully for a while. Phil, secretly, had a big plan. He first went to the door and watched for a while. The zombie Marvin noticed him right away. He pressed against the glass door. Phil pretended to be very scared. William walked to the door and quietly observed. He suggested that they should cooperate and kill the zombies. Phil immediately agreed. He said they could do 2 versus 1 and 3 versus 1. He said they also needed a plan. Manny also agreed to join. He asked Phil how to do it. They decided to distract the zombies' attention first and then launch a surprise attack. They searched for a while and each took a handy weapon. William volunteered to go out and attack the zombies. Then Phil, Carmen, and Manny also expressed their willingness to go out and fight the zombies. There was only one problem left. Who would be responsible for distracting the zombies? They turned their eyes to Son, who was in the restaurant. She felt their gazes on her. She clenched the bag of food he had hidden under the table. Quickly, Phil walked to Son's side privately. He gave Son the assigned task. He said she had to knock on the window. Son agreed. William cheered Son up and then they left from the front door. Manny and Carmen went out from the back door. She pulled up the white blinds. As Phil instructed, she kept knocking on the window. Soon the zombie Marvin heard the noise. He pounced on the window. He smashed the glass with his fists. The zombie Barbara was also attracted. The 2 zombies surrounded the window and hit it violently. Phil and William, who had been watching from the porch, opened the door and rushed out. Manny and Carmen walked towards the zombies. Phil and William teamed up to deal with Barbara. Manny and Carmen joined forces to deal with Marvin. Sun watched the situation outside closely in the restaurant. The zombies' fighting power was really too strong. They didn't feel any pain at all. They didn't get any advantage in 2 versus 1. They felt like they were being overpowered by the zombies. Sun hurried to the back door. Sun opened the door and let William and the others in. They sat down in a mess. They didn't use their full strength in the last fight. Phil suggested that they go out and fight again. The others obviously didn't think so. They started to quarrel. Phil angrily proposed that they escape on their own. Whoever ran faster, whoever survived. William also agreed with anger. Sun disagreed, which everyone knew. Phil started again. He made William and Sun feel a great sense of crisis. They looked nervously at the back kitchen. Soon Phil and the others finished talking. Phil took William away. He persuaded William to agree with his decision. They had to sacrifice someone to escape. Phil also tried to soften William with his family and make him agree. William refused Phil's proposal. He couldn't cruelly decide the life and death of others. He couldn't ruthlessly abandon his friends who shared the same difficulties. The plan collapsed. William returned to Sun's side. He picked up a weapon. Sun also took the food bag as a weapon in her hand. Phil and the others also picked up weapons. Outside, the zombies kept hitting the door. Inside, the 2 groups of people were deadlocked. Sun suddenly noticed the wound on Phil's hand. He asked him the source of the wound. William also helped out. Phil pulled down his sleeve in a panic. He said his wound was from sliding on the door. This obvious move made him more suspicious. Carmen and Manny also asked him. Phil refused to admit it. He was so angry that he asked Manny to grab Sun with him. He wanted to throw her out. When Phil approached Sun step by step, Manny hit Phil's head from behind. Carmen also joined in. They beat Phil up. William also came over to help. He threw Phil out of the restaurant. On the other side, Rose and Spears, who were rescued by the curly-haired man, they formed a new team of 3 and continued to walk forward. Rose walked slowly behind. Maybe she was still immersed in the death of her husband. Rose felt dizzy. Then she saw her daughter Anna's figure. She was at the front of the team. Rose stumbled and pushed Spears to the front of the team. Rose soon realized that this was her own illusion. She couldn't bear it anymore and cried. Rose and Spears, who were exhausted, soon ran out of strength. When they couldn't hold on, they found a restaurant not far away. The 3 of them ran into the restaurant. The zombies, Barbara and Marvin, were circling outside the restaurant. Spears checked his bullet. He had 2 left. If the 2 zombies didn't move, he could still kill them. When Spears was holding the gun and ready to approach Marvin and shoot him, there was a noise from the porch. It was Phil, who had been thrown out of the restaurant by William. The zombie quickly pounced on Phil. Spears took the opportunity to shoot Barbara in the head. The remaining bullet didn't kill Marvin. Spears and Marvin fought. The curly-haired man also came to help, but Marvin was too fierce. Spears and the curly-haired man couldn't resist. Fortunately, the 4 people in the restaurant rushed out. They subdued Marvin together. They formed a new team and set off again. They kept moving towards the stadium. The first stop of the team was an abandoned factory. It was the weapons factory that Carmen and Manny mentioned before. They split into 2 groups. Manny took Carmen and Rose from the front door first. Spears, curly-haired, William, and Sun also ambushed at the side door. They waited for the opportunity to sneak in, but their actions had been discovered long ago. There were 2 soldiers in military uniforms on the roof of the factory. They had been observing the surroundings with binoculars. They had seen the actions of the abandoned people clearly when they approached the factory, and these 2 soldiers were familiar faces. They were the ones who escorted Spears at the beginning, the 2 who went ahead to explore. But Spears and the others didn't know that they had been exposed. They still acted according to the plan. Manny took Carmen and Rose to the door. He rang the doorbell. He said he had new goods and pointed to Rose next to him. The big man at the door observed the 3 of them through the monitor. He opened the door and let the 3 of them in. Then he checked the 3 of them. He was very satisfied with Rose. He touched her from top to bottom as he searched her. Then he led the 3 of them to the factory. They took the elevator to the bottom. There were people everywhere downstairs. It was an underground gathering place. The big man first put Rose in a room. Then he led Manny and Carmen to the exit. He let the 2 of them go through by themselves. He hurried back to the room where Rose was. Manny and Carmen looked at each other and walked into the passage. Manny stopped in the middle and looked around. Carmen ran quickly to the corner. Spears, William, and Son, who had been waiting outside, let them in. Manny and Carmen kissed briefly and then separated. Manny took Spears and Son to steal weapons. Carmen and William were responsible for creating chaos in the factory. Manny and the three of them came to the weapon room carefully. Spears rushed up and beat up the guard. Then Son stabbed the guard's head with a knife and killed him. Manny took out his own lockpick and opened the door with a wire clip. They entered the door and slowly went down the elevator. A room full of weapons stunned Spears and Son. Then the three of them packed 2 big bags of weapons. These 2 big bags of weapons would look very conspicuous wherever they went. So Manny took off the iron window on the vent. He and Son took the weapons and escaped from the vent. They avoided the crowd. Spears didn't need to carry weapons. He just needed to escape from the original way. Carmen and William made it. After separating from Manny, Carmen took William to the factory. A group of people were holding a party. Carmen and William mixed in the crowd. They quietly came to the power room. William was responsible for cutting off the power. Carmen also looked around outside. William lit a lighter and illuminated it. He soon found the main switch. He operated it and cut off the power of the whole factory. William, who had completed the task, came to the door. He cautiously opened a crack in the door and observed the situation outside. He heard a gunshot, but it didn't come from his team, and then escape. He saw a woman in a heavy coat walking in the center of the party. She pretended to seduce a strong man in the crowd. She took advantage of the power outage and stabbed the strong man with a knife in her hand. Rose and Lance tried to escape the zombies. They went downstairs and found a way out to escape. Spears, on the other hand, was trapped in the crowd of zombies. Fortunately, there were stairs next to him, and he climbed up to the exit. Earlier, when Rose was in the small room, she saw many people inside in a daze. She sat down while waiting for the time to come out. Next to her was Lance, who was asleep. When the big man came and tried to grope Rose, Lance, who saw it, screamed and stopped him. The big man was going to teach him a lesson. Luckily, the power went out and the big man came out. Rose took advantage of this moment to escape with Lance. They walked downstairs and got out. The curly-haired man then appeared to block the exit and threw Molotovs. On the other side, Spears, who was left alone, walked into the factory. He had just gone up the stairs and all the lights went out. Then a group of people rushed towards him. Spears dodged the crowd and continued to walk to the front corridor. The glass doors on both sides of the corridor were crowded with escaping people. Spears was confused. Soon a glass door was kicked open. The people inside ran out. The zombies followed closely. Spears didn't dare to stay. He ran up the stairs and out of the factory. He used the wooden coil by the door to hold the door. He prevented the zombies from running out. After the door was safely blocked, Spears quickly ran to the vent. He saw the bag full of weapons on the ground near the exit. Inside the vent, Manny and Son were crawling in fear to get out. They hear screams and hordes of zombies. They tried to keep crawling and suddenly heard gunshots. Son cowered in fear, hoping she would survive. She looked back and somehow Manny was hit and killed him instantly. Manny instantly turned into a vicious zombie and crawled around trying to eat Son. Son continued to crawl until she found the metal cover that was the escape route. She opened the cover and threw the bag of weapons out. Her leg was pulled by Zombie Manny, and luckily Spears heard and shot Zombie Manny. Spears pulled Son out and escaped into the tunnel. They opened the gun bag and each held a gun. As they prepare to shoot, sound is heard outside. Spears and Son quickly hid. The people who came were not others. They were the remaining teammates. Spears and Son quickly greeted them. Spears helped Rose and Lance sit down together. Son went to William's side and asked about his foot. William explained that he twisted his foot when he ran away. It was an old injury and it was nothing serious. As everyone was asking each other about the situation, Carmen looked around in the back. There was no trace of Manny. Carmen asked Spears and Son. They were the three of them who were responsible for stealing weapons. Spears and Son looked at each other. They didn't take the initiative to say Manny's death. In this silent moment, a zombie's roar came from the outside. They quickly hid in a small room next to them. A group of zombies ran in. They didn't dare to make a sound. They didn't want to attract the zombies' attention. After 2 zombies ran past, a burst of gunfire sounded. A man in military uniform shouted a word. Then another man's voice came. He told Rose and the others to come out of the room. The place was safe. Spears walked out. There were two people standing in front of him. However, Spears recognized one of them. He was a friend of the soldier Spears killed. Later, the soldier asked about the number of Rose's group. Rose answered honestly. The soldier explained the chaotic state of the city. They keep moving and find a place to rest. Everyone relaxed and adjusted their state. Spears was holding a gun and standing alert. He knew that the two soldiers were coming for him. The soldier told Spears to rest as well. He said that he and his friend would take care of the first shift. Since he had already said that, Spears had to pretend to put down his gun and sit down. The soldier said that they would leave after cleaning up. They could avoid encountering zombies. They could ensure the speed of progress. They planned to reach the stadium by tomorrow morning. The soldiers also explained that the stadium would organize evacuation from tomorrow. 2 hours a batch, a total of 24 hours. Rose curiously asked where the team would arrange to evacuate. The soldiers did not tell the specific location. They said they wanted to evacuate to a deserted place, away from the city center. Where was the safe place? The soldiers also couldn't answer. After they told everyone what they knew, some places had already become black areas. There were no living people, only zombies. The army only had to ensure enough medicine to bomb these areas. Later, the two soldiers turned the topic to Spears. They asked about Spears' companions. Spears didn't have any companions. They actually wanted to ask about the soldier who was responsible for guarding Spears. Spears said bluntly that his companion was dead. He escaped by luck. The soldier learned of his companion's death, and his face changed. They didn't believe what Spears said about escaping by luck. They looked at Spears with anger. The two soldiers understood the situation. Everyone fell into silence. They were all worried about their relatives in their hearts. Sun recited prayers in Korean. Regardless of the language barrier, the prayers deeply penetrated everyone's hearts. Most people's eyes were wet with tears. The soldier didn't say anything. He just waited for the bombing to end. It wasn't long before Rose woke up. Rose yelled for Spears, but no one answered. Rose hurriedly picked up her gun. Rose held her gun and followed the voice. She pushed the door and went out. She ventured forward by the light of a flashlight. In the darkness, her fear grew. Rose breathed feverishly. Soon she saw a big iron pressing down on a zombie. The zombie was not dead, but the big iron restricted its movement. Rose quickly walked past him. She shouted Spears' name. She walked in the direction of the sound she heard. Rose was walking very fast. She saw 3 figures in front of her. She caught up and looked. It was Spears and 2 soldiers. The soldier was holding Spears with his hands behind his back and pressing him forward with his gun. Rose wanted to stop the 3 of them. The 2 soldiers ignored Rose. They continued to press Spears forward. They told Rose that Spears was a very dangerous person. They would take him to a safe place. Then they would come back and join Rose's group. Rose had no choice but to follow the 3 of them. He called Spears' name. But what was going on? Before Spears could speak, the soldier told Rose that Spears was actually their colleague. Spears turned his head and explained to Rose that he was not the person the 2 soldiers said. Rose didn't fully believe him. She asked Spears if he was called Spears. Spears reluctantly denied it. The soldier directly revealed Spears' information. Spears' real name was James. He was a big liar. He was also a murderer. Spears knew that the 2 soldiers were not part of the army. They were stragglers. They were looking for a sum of money. They thought he had a clue to the money. That's why they wanted to arrest him. Everyone has their own reasons. Who should she believe? Should she believe Spears' words or the soldiers? Rose looked at Spears, who was walking in front of him. They looked at each other, and then Rose made a decision. She took out her gun and decisively shot the 2 soldiers in the head. The operation scared both Spears and Rose. They calmed down a little. The other members of the team had already woken up. They each filled their weapons with bullets. The noise of Rose and Spears' return. The 5 people in the house quickly prepared. They saw that only Rose and Spears came back. They asked about the whereabouts of the soldiers. Rose didn't tell them what happened. Spears simply told them that the 2 of them didn't make it. Then Rose told them to take their weapons and bullets. They were ready to leave. They loaded the ammunition and carried the guns back to the ground. When they looked around and observed the situation, the curly-haired man whistled at the door behind him. Soon a dog ran out of the building and stopped at the curly-haired man's side. The curly-haired man used a belt. The 6 people under him watched them go away. Lance asked loudly where the curly-haired man was going. The curly-haired man didn't seem to answer him. He kept walking away. The curly-haired man's departure didn't have much effect on the six. They continued their journey through the city center. They saw the towering buildings in front of them. They walked steadily. Before the end of the world, the city center was full of people. How many zombies will there be after the end of the world? After a night of rest, the 6 members of the troop came out of the basement and reached the ground. They had to cross the city center and finally reach the stadium. Rose and Spears walked in front. William and Son were responsible for both sides. Carmen and Lance followed behind. They held their weapons and kept their formations slowly. At the same time, other survivors also emerged from different directions. They headed towards the city center. On the empty street, a zombie ran towards the survivors. They all fired. The sound of gunfire rang out continuously. The zombie was shot and was completely dead. Then another zombie ran out, but their fate was the same as the first. They fell under the gunfire of the people. It seemed that the more people, the stronger. They soon solved the zombie problem. Spears asked the 5 people in the team to continue. Carmen seemed to be having trouble. She did not respond to Spears' shout. She did not move at all. She clutched her chest. Then she vomited blood. Turns out she got hit in the chest while attacking the zombies. It turns out that more people is not a good thing. Carmen's condition made the survivors around her panic. They all consciously moved away from Carmen. The 5 people in the team also retreated and opened the distance. After a while, Carmen turned into a zombie. She pounced on the team members. Fortunately, everyone retreated quickly. Carmen started attacking strangers. At the same time, zombies were also running around from all directions. The survivors were caught off guard and were knocked down one by one. This caused more and more zombies to appear. The once neat team of survivors was thrown into chaos. They had to dodge many zombies. They all fled in different directions. The group was forced to split up. On one side, Spears brought Son and Lance along with the crowd. They climbed up the stairs. They arrived at the square in front of the office building. Not only do they have to dodge zombie attacks, they also had to watch out for bullets from the survivors who were shooting blindly. They didn't know if they would be unlucky. They will be wounded by human bullets. The scene was also chaotic, with survivors and zombies everywhere. There were bullets flying everywhere. Spears and his 3 companions didn't dare to run around. They could only lean carefully on the stone pillars at the entrance of the office building and move forward occasionally. They killed 3 or 4 zombies along the way. They avoided several waves of people. Spears, Son, and Lance managed to reach the other end of the office building. Spears quietly observed the situation. He thought the situation was safe. He ran through the crowd of people and reached a small street. Son also took the opportunity and ran after him. Since zombies suddenly appeared, Lance had to focus on killing the zombies in front of him. After he finished, he was blocked by the crowd. He had a better chance to rush over. Seeing his situation so chaotic, Lance didn't dare to stay in place. He ran around the other side of the office building. He ran away from Spears and Son. Seeing Lance running away, Spears and Son could only continue forward. Spears was responsible for clearing the zombies that came up. On the other side, Rose rushed to the front. William's foot injury. He barely followed Rose's speed, struggling to move forward. Even so, he still lagged behind Rose. He dodged while. When William solved the zombie hiding behind the wall, the bomb dropped by the bomber caused a big explosion. The strong airwave knocked William down directly. William was stunned. He fell to the ground. He couldn't get up for a long time. A burst of smoke came. William, who was not awake, heard a shout. It turned out that the group running in front of him found William's situation. She ran back and helped William up. She went forward with William. Lance's situation was not very good either. He ran all the way, but he bumped into a man at the corner. The rifle in his hand also fell to the ground. Lance wanted to pick up the rifle, but the man also wanted to get it. He was a step slower, letting the man get the gun. The man got the gun and naturally refused to give in. After all, the gun was an important tool for saving lives. The man raised his gun and threatened Lance. Lance immediately raised his hands, indicating that he gave up. He didn't want to fight with the man. Just as Lance was about to leave, the man was knocked down by a zombie behind him. The gun fell to the ground again. And there were more zombies running towards this side with their teeth and claws. Lance didn't care about picking up the gun. He ran forward. Gradually, there was a large group of zombies behind Lance. He also took advantage of the cars on the side of the road and skillfully outwitted the zombies behind him. Lance ran. A big smoke behind him also appeared. Lance stumbled. He couldn't stay still, so he stood up and ran again. Spears and Son killed zombies that appeared along the way. They climbed the stairs to the overpass. When Spears asked Son about the whereabouts of the others, William and Rose also came to the overpass from the other direction. They managed to meet up. Due to William's leg injury, Spears let the three of them go first. He stayed behind to escort them from behind. Spears struggled with the oncoming zombies. He was still caught by a zombie soldier. He saw the zombie's big mouth. Spears forcefully choked the zombie's neck. He couldn't bite Spears. Under the fight, Spears took the opportunity to pull out the pistol from his back. He shot the zombie's head twice. The number of zombies was too many. He solved one and more zombies came out on the stairs. Spears couldn't resist and had to retreat. Spears quickly caught up with Rose and the others. At this time, William's injury was very serious. He couldn't walk by himself. Rose and Son dragged him and couldn't walk fast. This would only drag everyone down. William knew it. He begged Rose to kill him. William's request made Rose hesitate. He was a teammate who shared the same hardships. Seeing that the zombie group behind him was about to catch up, Rose finally got up the courage and gave William a shot. She ended his life. Rose ran ahead. They blocked the group of zombies with an iron fence held in place by a gun. They walked along the stairs to the center of the stadium. They looked all over the stadium. They didn't find anyone. Suddenly, at the opposite exit, a man with a gun came out. Rose and the others were immediately alert. They held their weapons and looked at each other. They observed carefully. They finally confirmed each other's human identity. Slowly, they put down their weapons. A little girl came out from behind the man. The girl walked down the stairs step by step. Rose looked at the girl's figure. She showed various expressions. She recognized the identity of the girl. She was her daughter, Anna. Anna also recognized her mother, Rose. She ran towards Rose with a smile. Rose's mission to find her daughter was finally complete, and the movie ends. This is the movie ending of Black Summer Season 1. Thank you for watching.